The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Gentlemen, start your engines. The, air quotes, legal tampering period begins on Monday with the start of free agency on Wednesday. Couple of moves by the Commanders yesterday to make sure two players don't get to free agency. One of them a very big one. And there are players who have been granted the right to seek partners for a trade that may interest the Commanders as well. So it is off-season hunting season, and everybody is all excited about all the different players that could come here. You know, it used to be that we would shake our heads at what they were doing in free agency. But now that they've got somebody competent at the top, like Adam Peters, you don't have to worry as much. Like the days of Dan Snyder openly having meetings with Albert Hainsworth's agent at St. Elmo's Steakhouse in Indianapolis during the Combine, the most conspicuous place to be at that time. Those days are over, and the moves that they make, I think by and large, will be sensible ones. There could be some that we look at later on and say, what were they thinking when they did that? But overall, you have to be very impressed with what they did last year, and you have to be impressed with what they've done, at least so far. They gave Zane Gonzalez $1.75 million in a contract, but that's not guaranteed money. There's probably, I'm just guessing, $30,000 or $40,000 guaranteed. So if they find another kicker in training camp, or he doesn't perform the way they hoped, and right now he's going to go down in history for the most famous doink in franchise history, as he doinked one in against Tampa Bay, and they won their first playoff game in 19 years. But they do need a kicker, and it's interesting. I saw the other day that Brandon McManus signed a long-term extension with Green Bay, like a 3 or 4 year deal, and it was a lot of money. And you may remember McManus was signed a little less than a year ago, right as free agency opened a year ago. He had been with Jacksonville, and they needed a veteran kicker, and he looked like he was going to be the answer. And then came the civil lawsuit from a couple of flight attendants that said that he sexually harassed them on a flight to London. Jacksonville plays there every year, and two of them had filed this civil suit, which was later dropped or later. Let's see, he was acquitted in it, I guess is the way to put it. But at the time, off what happened with Dan Snyder, there was no way they could keep him on the roster. So he might have been the long-term answer at kicker, but fortunately for the Commanders, the kicking game didn't cost them anything last year. They went as far as they could go, and the game against Philadelphia didn't matter who was kicking in that game. They could have had Jan Stenrud in his prime. It wouldn't have mattered. They got their doors blown off in that game. But the Bobby Wagner signing is at the top of the news today, and Bobby Wagner coming back on a one-year deal, $9 million. Reports are $8.5 million guaranteed. I mean, he had an outstanding year last year, 132 tackles, 2 sacks, defended 4 passes, played in all the games, was second-team All-Pro, and in the playoffs had 25 tackles and half a sack in the 3 games. And the big thing is his leadership. Everybody talks about his leadership. He's got a great relationship with Jaden Daniels. I mean, it didn't seem like they were going to let him get away unless somebody really blew his doors off with a money offer, and that apparently did not happen. I think a couple of interesting angles on this signing too for Wagner, who's in his mid-30s. I think he'll be 35 before the season starts. He's getting his, as I understand it, he's getting his MBA from Howard this summer. And so his ties here would be limited, though you can do those kind of degrees online. So, whether he went back to the West Coast or some other place, he could have finished up. But the other interesting angle on this is, what's his future going to be with the organization? If he wants to coach, I think it's going to be a very smooth transition like Ryan Kerrigan. Kerrigan stayed with the team. It was one of the 1 or 2 holdovers from the staff of Ron Rivera. And I could see Bobby Wagner if he wants to coach. The other thing that might be very attractive for him to stay here is Magic Johnson And there are players, Terry McLaurin's talked about this, there are others who've said, and rightly so, hey, I'd like to pick Magic Johnson's brain because post-football, I'm very interested in what he did with his life. You know, he's become one of the most successful former athletes ever, right along there with Michael Jordan, who's a billionaire. And I think Magic's a billionaire. And he's been very smart and savvy in his investments, investing in a lot of teams, and using his personality to become one of the most successful businessmen in this country. And I think that players are looking at that. And Bobby Wagner getting his MBA, I think he might want to be around Magic. So he's going to have a lot of options if he sticks around here. So that makes a lot of sense for him to come back. And it makes a lot of sense for the team because of his leadership. And even if he drops off a little bit in terms of his physical play and his talent, he still brings that leadership to the locker room, which they're going to want. Now we get to Deebo Samuel. And we talked a lot about the deal and what they gave up, which was a fifth-round pick. He wrote a letter on the Players Tribune the other day about coming here. He says, I think this is one of the best possible fits for me where I can go to help a team. Honestly, when my agent asked me where I wanted to go, this was one of the teams at the top of my list. I started watching Jaden Daniels because of Brandon Ayuk. And that's like his best friend. We used to chill, watch LSU games, and I knew he was going to be a stud. I've got some connections already with the coaching staff, definitely ready to work with Terry McLaurin, for sure, because we came in the league at the same time. I heard how hard he grinds. I'm just ready to match the energy to get it. He says, I've got the feeling that this season is going to be about them ones, and he put ones in like italics. So he expects this to be a special season, and he's looking at Terry McLaurin, who's probably going to have his contract redone. At the moment, Samuel makes more than Terry McLaurin. He's got $17.5 million left on his deal, and from the reports, they are not going to extend the contract. In other words, stretch the money out so they don't take the cap hit with that this year. This looks like a prove-it season for him. He's 29 years old. He has admitted to being out of shape before, being 20 pounds overweight. But I think he's looking at this as a way to extend his career and extend it with a great quarterback. I think even though Brock Purdy has taken the 49ers to the Super Bowl, I think if you ask most players who would you like to play with, Brock Purdy or Jaden Daniels, I think they'd say Jaden Daniels. So he's happy to be here, and the question is, how long is he going to stay? They don't have any – he's got no guaranteed money. So if they cut him before the season starts, they don't owe him anything. But with $17.5 million left, they're saying to him, okay, we got the cap room to do it. And we are willing to play this out, see how it goes, and if it looks good at the end of the season, we'll try to sign you to an extension if you hit free agency, or like in the case of Bobby Wagner, just before you hit free agency, we may work out an extension for you. Tom Lovero's got a column about this today, and it's something I talked about yesterday as well, about him being hungry and how much does he want to prove it this year to get to that level where he can get the next contract. And as pointed out, on the last year of his rookie deal, which was 2021, he caught 77 passes for 1,400 yards, league-leading 18.2 yards a catch, carried the ball 59 times for 365 yards, and I think he had 14 touchdowns that season. And in saying, what he said in the Players Tribune story about this being the best possible fit for him, that is an indication that he's coming here happy and he's coming here motivated, which is a good thing. Now, Lovero points this out, and we always say this, he's in a contract year, therefore he's going to play better, and he did in his last contract year. But Lovero says there is no data that supports the notion that the players produce better when they are in line for the big payday. But there is no shortage of anecdotal evidence. Heck, the 2024 Commanders were a team full of players looking to get paid, 28 unrestricted free agents this year. Washington fans have firsthand knowledge of contract year performance. Deron Payne was playing for his financial future in 2022 when he set career highs in numerous categories, including 11.5 sacks, and made his first Pro Bowl. He signed a 4-year, $90 million extension and hasn't come close to those numbers since. So, it could go that way too with Debo, that he could have a great year, sign a contract, and never reach those numbers again, which has been pretty much the case in San Francisco. He got the big extension for a lot of money and hasn't produced at that level. Now, we talk a lot about what they gave up to get him, and most people that have commented on this have said, whoa, Washington got a steal. Now, they're picking up the money. That's a big chunk of cap space, $17.5 million, even though they've got cap space. But it's also only a fifth-round draft pick to get him. Seems like a steal for most people. Chase Daniel played a long time in the league, originally signed here as an undrafted free agent, then went to New Orleans when they cut him in training camp and managed to carve out like a 14-year career, starting only like 4 games in his entire career. But he's gone on to a lot of broadcast work. He does a podcast with Diana Rossini, who's now with The Athletic. She used to be with ESPN, and before that, Channel 4 here. Listen to what Chase Daniel says about what Washington gave up to get Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, wow. I don't know.
Too much or not enough?
I thought it was too much. I know some people that thinks it wasn't enough, but I think it was too much for an aging player who can still be a home run threat, but,
I think there are some that had that opinion, especially considering the fact that there wasn't a lot of competition. John Lynch spoke with several teams. He was looking for a 4th rounder, but in the end he settled with a 5th round or 2025 5th round pick with the Commanders. But my thought was Adam Peters, the general manager, he scouted Deebo out of college, right? He knew everything about him. He obviously has a trust in him. He believes in some type of skill set that he could bring to this young quarterback. What do you think he does? Like, what's the immediate Deebo Samuel and Washington addition do for you?
Yeah, the Deebo Samuel we know and love is a beast with the ball in his hands. He's an absolute playmaker. He can take a now screen, like just throw it out there right now at the line of scrimmage, 60 yards. He can catch slant routes, his run after the catch. He's an angry runner. He's a tempo setter. He's all those things. That described him in 2021. His all-pro year when he had 1,400 receiving yards. I think he had almost 2,000 total yards, 14 touchdowns that year. He's struggled with injury. He's missed 20 games in his career due to injury. So I don't know. I think it'll definitely have an impact on the offense and on Jaden Daniels when he gets to the Commanders. We've never seen, and I'm going to be interested to watch, we've never seen Deebo be the true number 2 option, because that's what he is right when he gets to Cliff Kingsbury's offense, because they have Scary Terry, which, crazy or not enough or not, he's making more. Debo's making more than Scary Terry, which I imagine would probably change.
They're going to try to Terry's going to try to get extended. We'll see.
Yeah, and we haven't seen Deebo be that true number 2. So how does he handle that at this point in his career where he's 29 years old? When you go to San Fran, he was always their 3rd, 4th option. He was their gadget guy, but a really good gadget like that, because you had, when CMC was healthy, you have CMC, you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Kittle, and then you probably have Deebo, right? He only got 12% of the touches in San Francisco, but now he goes to the true number 2 option the day he walks in that building come the start of the new league year. How is he going to handle defenses preparing for him even more? Okay, because they're going to try to take away Scary Terry. Is he a good enough receiver, a true receiver, to be that true number 2? I don't know. This is a prove-it year, in my opinion, for Deebo Samuel.
So not a great review from Chase Daniel on Deebo Samuel. It's let's see what he's got left. Brandon Ayuk is under contract to San Francisco. You may remember last summer he made a lot of noise about coming here before he got his extension. But he's due $50 million guaranteed money over the next 2 years. Washington's still looking for a receiver. Is it possible? I don't think so. But is it possible they could make a deal for him in San Francisco and that the 49ers pick up some of the money? Because, again, you've got now 3 receivers under contract for next year, only 3 of them. Luke McCaffrey, who was a draft pick last year, Terry McLaurin, and now Deebo Samuel. Of the ones that are available as free agents to come back here, do you bring back De'Ami Brown? Do you bring back Noah Brown, who had the catch in the Hail Mary game? I don't know. Is that possible? Jamison Crowder, who's a kick returner and a receiver, and had a big catch last year. He had the catch to beat Philadelphia. He may have something left. I mean, those are what you're looking at to possibly re-sign with all these free agents. Remember, they went into this with 28 of them, and you've got, now you've got Bobby Wagner signed, and you've got Zane Gonzalez signed. But what about some of these other names? And then you've got the tight end, Zach Ertz. Will he follow what Bobby Wagner did, sign a one-year deal, or could he go someplace else? I think more than likely he's going to be back here. And then, the other thing that's really glaring that they have to address, with all of this, hey, they got another wide receiver, all right, and are they going to bring back Zach Ertz? Bobby Wagner's only a part of making what was a questionable defense better. They were good enough, but they won 5 games on the last play of the game. There's a lot of things that went right last year. If some of that reverses this year, then the defense doesn't look as good as it looked, relatively speaking. The numbers were okay. They improved as a defense last year. They went from 32nd in points and yards allowed in 2023 to 23rd in points allowed per possession and 21st in yards. I mean, these are not, top of the chart numbers. These are bottom third here, 23rd and 21st. So they've got to improve the defense. And then you got questions about some of the people that you may or may want to bring back in free agency, like Dante Fowler. He's going to be a free agent. Do you bring back Jeremy Chin from the secondary? Noah Igbenogany had a pretty good year at times. Does he come back? He's a free agent. And then you got depth on the offensive line. Is Cornelius Lucas somebody you bring back? And then the quarterback, the backup quarterback. They have the guy from Notre Dame, I think, is actually signed, who didn't play. He's on the roster, but Jeff Driscoll is a free agent. That's another, practice squad type of guy. But the big one is Marcus Mariota. What are you going to do for a backup quarterback for next year? You'd like to have him back, but he's sort of indicated that if he's going to play the same role next year, he'd like to be closer to his home on the West Coast. So we'll see where that goes. There's also Olamide Zaccheaus, who's a free agent also as a wide receiver. Does he come back next year? So they've got, all these guys that they need to look at, and I'm sure they are. And we'll find out next week which ones are going to be re-signed and which new group of players are they bringing in. I mean, they brought him in by the busload last year, and it worked out great. Do they do it this way next year, for this year, this upcoming year, or do they bring back some guys for continuity? We'll see about that. Last year, a total house cleaning, a fumigation, it was the way to go, clearly the way to go. This year, I don't know about that. And then with the cap room they have, even with the re-signing of Bobby Wagner and even with bringing in Deebo Samuel, there is still some cap room left, and they're still looking at an edge rusher. Yeah, you'd like to have Myles Garrett, but that's a big song and dance going on right now. He even asked the other day, reportedly, to speak to owner Jimmy Haslam, and Haslam said no. Their position is, sorry, we're not trading you. That may be just more negotiating, but I would think that that's a situation probably not going to end that well for Cleveland. And then this popped up yesterday. Trey Hendrickson of Cincinnati, he's 30 years old, clearly has tread left on the tire. He had 17.5 sacks last year. He's made the Pro Bowl 4 times, and they've told him he can go make a trade for himself. And you might say, well, God, the Bengals are terrible defensively. That's what kept them out of the playoffs. It was their defense. Yes, but you could also look at it this way. With a guy getting 17.5 sacks, they still stunk. So rather than give him huge money, and he wants an extension, obviously, he's due $18 million on a contract, the end of the contract for this year. What do you do? If you give him a long-term extension and you pay him a lot of money, you're tying up a lot of money on a defensive player who played for a defense that stunk last year. And they still have to find out a way to get their wide receivers signed and some other things that taken care of. You've even had Joe Burrow say he'd adjust his contract to do it. But Commanders would make a lot of sense if they do it. And can they work out a contract which, the salary cap, it's there and there's money there, but it doesn't just, extend. Once you start to chew into it, it disappears really quick. And then you got to look long term when 2 years from now you're going to sign Jaden Daniels to an extension, and that's really going to eat up a lot of cap room. So a lot to be decided. The legal tampering period will begin on Monday, and we'll see what happens from there. Oh, we got stuff happening. We got players chirping at analysts, and it ramped up in a big way last night with what Charles Barkley said on TNT. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We will get to more on the annual opening of the Turkish Bazaar for the NFL as free agency gets underway next week in the most NFL of ways, where you have 2 days where teams can be talking to players, but they can't legally announce a contract until we get to Wednesday. So busy weekend for Adam Peters and his staff, and lots of phone calls and lots of backroom dealing. It's weird that a league has a rule that you can kind of bend the rule. You know, it used to be, and Dan Snyder was like, gentlemen, start your engines on this. They used to start free agency at midnight, and you couldn't have any contact with a player before that. So Snyder and his crew would get in a room with a telephone. I guess they had cell phones in those days. Yeah, they did, but maybe it was a landline. I don't know. But, you know, he had agents on speed dial, and he thought at 12:01, you know, he could make a deal. And what do you know? 12:01, they had a $100 million deal for Albert Hainsworth. Doesn't work that way anymore. There's a lot of stuff going on. And then I guess it's like 3 o'clock or so, or sometime in the afternoon next Wednesday, they can officially announce what the deals are. And the Commanders were really busy last year, signed a lot of free agents, and most of them worked out. Meantime, we got some weird stuff happening in the NBA. We've had players feuding with players. That happens from time to time. Players feuding with owners. That happens. Coaches, general managers. Sometimes fans get into it with players. Now we got analysts and players going at it. And there was an incident last night at the Laker game where Stephen A. Smith was sitting courtside. He likes everybody to see him, and he can certainly now afford the seats now that he's got a new contract, which reportedly pays him $20 million a year over 5 years, a $100 million deal. But LeBron was seen going over to him and saying, "Leave my son out of this," with some profanities in there. And look, Bronny James not an NBA player. He's in the NBA because of his dad. Stephen A. has a job as an analyst to comment on those things, so I don't blame him at all for what he said. But things are ramping up, and boy, Charles Barkley unloaded last night on Kendrick Perkins and, to some extent, Stephen A., and we will get to that. But what's happening in the NBA since this Luka deal, if you haven't been paying attention, this has been as bad as it can be for Dallas. That Anthony Davis is still out, was hurt in the first game he played for them, and now Kyrie Irving is going to miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. It is a complete disaster. It's going the other way for the Lakers. They won their 8th straight last night. And Jimmy Jackson, who is a great player in college at Ohio State and in the NBA, and is an analyst now for a variety of networks. He does Big Ten college stuff, and he also does the Clippers TV as an analyst. He was on Dan Patrick's show yesterday, asked who's the best duo in the NBA right now.
Luka and LeBron.
Yeah.
Which is scary. I mean, because Luka is starting to fit in and trying to figure it out. And LeBron is acquiescing to allowing him to now initiate the offense, handle the ball. And it's only going to get better. And I think the biggest beneficiary is Jackson Hayes. Because now you have two playmakers that are able to attract defense, lob it to the rim, give you some other opportunities. So I think that team is in the West because of what's happened with Minnesota. I think Memphis is going to have a little bit of issues going down the stretch. That the Lakers put themselves in primetime position to be a threat to OKC.
We were talking about, it seems to be open season on LeBron. Analysts, broadcasters have no problem being critical of LeBron.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, granted, no social media with Michael Jordan, but
yeah,
let's say this was reversed. Let's say LeBron came before Michael Jordan. would we be holding on to LeBron the way a lot of people hold on to Michael? That LeBron, all-time leading scorer, like all the numbers that he has, and then Mike comes along and wins 6 titles in the first 13 years. Would we be so quick to say Mike is now better than LeBron if it was reversed?
That's a great question because, the narrative around LeBron, it's very interesting because I'm going to say this. I think we're critical in today's world on a lot of stuff, depending on who we like and what we prefer. And it depends on, too, I think it's not only LeBron and the basketball side, it's other things outside of basketball, okay? The whole Miami issue, when he chose to go down to Miami, when it was to back to Cleveland, now to L.A., all that plays into more than just basketball. Mike did the same thing, and we judged it on LeBron just being with Chicago. Then at the end of the year, he unretired and came back and went to Washington. I think we would judge it the same kind of way. If LeBron had Jordan's mentality back in the day, and Mike had LeBron's with regards to playing more like a Magic, I think we would do that. And that's the unfortunate part is that, to me, greatness only comes along so often. We've been blessed, a Tom Brady, a Tiger Woods, a Wayne Gretzky, a Michael Jordan. Now we see a LeBron James, a Steph Curry. Guys like this don't come along. But when they do, in today's world, but we did it with Mike, though. They did it with Mike early in his career. They really nitpicked at Mike a lot about he's not able to win a championship the way he plays. Let's not forget that. Now, it wasn't blasted across mainstream news as much because we had newspapers. We had talk shows, but not a plethora of talk shows, radio-wise. Sports Center was kind of the main entity with regards to how we got our information and downloaded sports. So he was criticized, but it was all relative to that era. LeBron is criticized relative to his era, which is social media and all the other platforms individually, collectively, and as corporations. And that's why we get all of this, I think, backlash for or towards him.
Yeah, and there is that. There is also backlash between analysts about LeBron. And recently, Kendrick Perkins, who is with ESPN, former player in the NBA, won a title with the Celtics, said that the Lakers have, quote, saved the NBA with the way that Luka and LeBron are playing right now, which led Charles Barkley to unload last night on Inside the NBA on TNT.
I saw a fool idiot on TV talking about the Lakers saved the NBA.
Save the NBA?
Yeah. He's an idiot and a fool, but he know who he is. What's his name, Shaq?
Which one you talking about?
Kendrick Perkins.
Oh.
He said the Lakers, first of all, the Lakers have had a great 2 weeks. He said the Lakers saved the NBA season. That's because them fools on the other network, which we're going to be working for next year, that's all they talk about. Let me tell y'all something.
Tell me something.
And first of all, I want all the smoke. I don't whistle when I walk by the graveyard or anything like that.
I don't whistle when I walk by the graveyard.
Right.
I like that.
Hey,
one.
man.
I'm stealing that one.
The Lakers are doing great. Got a long way to go. But the reason the season's been going great for the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Y'all just want to talk about the Warriors and the Lakers. They're both doing great. Don't get me wrong. If I turn out to be wrong, I got no problem with that. But y'all are idiots because y'all talk about the Lakers and the Warriors all the time. Y'all don't. The Cleveland Cavaliers have won 12 straight games. The Oklahoma City got the MVP, and they are on fire. Y'all are talking about who's in second place. That's the reason I get pissed. Hey, the Lakers are doing great. I don't mind being wrong. The Warriors are doing great. But that's because you fools on other networks, which we're going to become fools next year. We'll be working on that network. But Oklahoma City and the Cavs been balling for 6 months. Y'all talking about teams that had two great weeks.
Time out. I get what you're saying. You just went at the whole network.
They talk about the same stuff.
Whole industry.
They talk about the same stuff every single day.
I would have to, but there's
Is there some credit? Is there some credit to be handed out here?
Yes. But don't say basketball's only watching now. First of all, between that and this lame-ass LeBron-Michael Jordan debate, which is lame. I've said it for years. The only people talk about LeBron and Michael is people on television who got no talent to talk about anything else. I've been saying that for years. I ain't hanging on to the 90s. I've always said LeBron's great, Michael's great. But y'all talk about it all the time and then got LeBron out there posing, talking about he all mad about being the face of the league. But it makes me mad. The Oklahoma City and the Cleveland Cavaliers are the two best stories in the NBA this year. Congratulations to the Lakers and the Warriors. They've had 2 good weeks. The Cavs and OKC have had 6 great months.
Okay. Tell us how you really feel.
All right.
Yeah, Shaq. Tell us how you feel.
Man. All right. Is this one of your favorite rants of all time?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I needed it on my birthday.
Yeah, Shaq was pretty much in tears. 53rd birthday yesterday, so happy birthday to Shaq. Some reaction on Twitter to 2 people who technically are going to be co-workers of Charles Barkley. You know about the deal that has been cut between ESPN and TNT, that ESPN is going to run that show, which is now not going to be connected to the NBA anymore on TNT. They may have some kind of deal where they discuss something else, but as you know, the NBA is leaving TNT next year, and ESPN is going to have it. So they made this deal that Charles and Shaq and Kenny and Ernie are all going to go do their show for ESPN. So I'll get to what ESPN probably thinks about this in a moment, but Kendrick Perkins responded on Twitter last night, and he wrote, "Hey, NBA on TNT might want to tell that senior citizen Charles Barkley that I'll be around. When he see an idiot or fool in person, make sure he keep that same energy. He can come playing with me if he want to, and I'm going to dress his ass like the numbers on a house. Straight from the 409 homeboy, and we bar none and fade all. Hashtag Texas boy." He actually grew up in Beaumont, Texas, East Texas, which I am quite familiar with, having worked there for a year. There was that from Kendrick Perkins. And this one is really intriguing from the new $100 million man, Stephen A. Smith, who wrote, "Yo, Chuck, stop the BS with the y'all. Attach a name to it. I know I've been talking about the Cavs being the number 1 threat to the Celtics. Once you come over here, there's going to be some folks waiting to call you a fool. P.S., and this is so Stephen A. P.S., you know I love you, though. See y'all soon, yo." So on one hand, he puffs out his chest, and he said, "Hey, if you're talking to me, name me because I've been pumping the Cavaliers and I've been pumping the Celtics." And he says, once you come over here, there's going to be some folks waiting to call you a fool. But then he wants to make sure that Charles still likes him because it's important for Stephen A. to travel in these circles. He wants to be rubbing shoulders with Charles Barkley, not be butting heads with him. So he had to throw in the P.S., I love you, though. See y'all soon, yo. Perk didn't hold back, and Perk is bigger than Barkley. Barkley went about 6'5", 6'6" when he played. Perkins is about 6'10", and they're both pretty beefy guys at this point. I don't think it'll ever come to blows, but this is some posturing going on. But the larger issue is this, and this is the way that ESPN may have to deal with something like this, that they got to make it look like they've got some discipline here. Could there be some kind of a suspension, probably with pay, something like that? Because I know firsthand, not myself, but I know people very close to who I worked with, that there are suspensions that go along with ripping coworkers or saying things about coworkers that they don't necessarily like. Now, ESPN likes to brush these things away without too much attention, but certain people I know for a fact have been taken off the air because of things that they have said about coworkers. So Barkley's not there yet. I guess technically he's not an ESPN employee, though there's an agreement in place. But they probably want to nip this in the bud. In radio, sometimes they encourage these kind of feuds. Sometimes they work out pretty well because what happens is the morning show says something about the guy who works in the afternoon, and the guy in the afternoon says something about what the guy in the morning show said, and it goes back and forth, and it makes some people want to listen. Hey, what did he say about him? Oh, boy, he cracked back on him. I'll listen to him in the afternoon. That works. ESPN doesn't like this stuff. They don't like it. And it's difficult for them to deal with because they have so many employees. But they also hired Charles Barkley because of who Barkley is. And he's making $21 million a year. Oh, by the way, yeah, he's $1 million ahead of Stephen A. to work, occasionally. One thing about Stephen A., he'll work round the clock for you. He'll be on every show. But Barkley's only working during basketball season. He does work, I guess, a little bit more during the NCAA tournament, but it's a once-a-week show. And he said, I'm 60 years old. I don't need the money. I don't need to work that much. So this is going to be one to keep an eye on. Analyst versus analyst. And now you got ex-player versus ex-player. Barkley, the better ex-player. He's a Hall of Famer. Perkins is not. But you cannot have it reached this level where Perkins is really taking this seriously. He says, when he see an idiot or fool in person, make sure he keep that same energy. He can come playing with me if he want to, and I'm on a address, and he wrote address in capitals, address his ass like the numbers on a house. Again, I don't know all the ins and outs of how this is being said, but it's not good. This has reached Jimmy Pitaro's desk, the head of ESPN, and going, oy vey. I don't think he said oy vey, but the equivalent of oy vey. What am I going to do about this? This is not a good. They don't like this. Trust me, I know this firsthand. They do not like employee on employee crime. And Barkley technically is not an employee, but he's also got so much power that if he goes to ESPN next year and he says these kind of things about Kendrick Perkins or Stephen A. or somebody else, he may have the power to say to ESPN, oh, yeah? You want to suspend me? Watch what the outcry is. I'm not going to go quietly. And I'm not worried about getting fired because if you fire me, I'll go someplace else. Now, the one thing they can do, and they do this all the time now with contracts, they will pay off a contract. They don't mind doing that. It's the way the numbers work, and it doesn't line up on the line of expenses, so the stockholders don't see it. But that could come to that. But we're a long way away from that. Point being, what Charles Barkley did last night, ESPN does not like in any way whatsoever. All right, coming up, Kevin Willard selling tickets for Maryland's regular season finale tomorrow. We'll get to that as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. It's the Andy Poland Show. Bram is coming up at 11 today as we round out the week. And the regular season, will round out for Maryland tomorrow afternoon as they host Northwestern. It's a 3 o'clock game. In what has been an excellent season for them. They can finish as high as number 2 in the Big Ten and get the double bye in the Big Ten tournament, which starts next week. And depending on what they do in the Big Ten tournament, if they get to the final, they may get as high as maybe a 3 seed, possibly. Right now, the various projections have them 5 or 6. But if they have a win on tomorrow against Northwestern and a run in the Big Ten, they could get to as high as maybe a 3 seed. Anyway, Kevin Willard selling tickets. Now, the last time Maryland played a home game, I was there, and that was a spectacular crowd. It was a crowd that showed up early. I got there early. It was a 6:30 game, and those are tough because of the Beltway traffic. It's tough for people to get there. Very, very impressed. Students lining up outside for their seats, just like the good old days at Cole Fieldhouse. They filled all the student section seats, and it looked like people who had tickets from the outside, not students, they got there early because by the time they tipped that off, the place was full. And I was looking around, like in the second half, there was not an empty seat in the building. It was exactly what you want for a college basketball game. Everything was perfect until they lost at the buzzer on a 65-footer. But they have been very impressive since that game because sometimes you have hangover after that. I remember in 2001 when they blew that 10-point lead against Duke with 54 seconds to go. It was Steve Blake had fouled out, their point guard, and they really didn't have anybody to handle the ball. They put in Drew Nicholas, who was a sophomore and really wasn't capable of doing that. He really wasn't a point guard, and it got away. They lost the game, and it was devastating. And I said, stupidly, they may not win another game all year. Now, they lost a game at home to Florida State after that. Florida State was not a good team, and there was some booing, and Gary Williams let the fans know it on the microphone. Hey, you can't be booing these college kids. And I thought, man, this season is going to unravel. And, of course, they proved me wrong, made it to the Final Four. Next year, they won the national championship. Now, Willard made a point of saying how impressed he was with his team. Veteran guys, I mean, college basketball is different now than it used to be. That, they have guys who played a lot of college basketball. But they came back just a couple days later, and they won on the road at Penn State, and then they won the other night at Michigan. So looks like whatever hangover there might have been from that crushing loss to Michigan State that has now dissipated, and they're ready to make their run in the postseason. This was Willard, though, the other night at Michigan after they won, talking to Andy Katz, and he made a point of saying this, not asked about it. This was unprompted as to what he is looking for tomorrow afternoon in College Park.
Saturday for me is going to be about Julian Reese. You know, he's a rarity in college basketball now. He stayed 4 years, had a coaching change, stayed with me. We had a tough year last year. He stayed with me. He's a true Maryland guy. I'm asking our fans to come out and make sure they come early and really celebrate a true Terp.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, to have it's not unusual now to have a 4 or 5 year player in college basketball. The average age of the starters at Auburn is 23. Okay, so that's the way college basketball is these days. But in many cases, these guys have been at 2 or 3 other schools before they get to where they are right now. And Maryland has those guys as well. But they also have Julian Reese. And Julian Reese is a true throwback. He's a throwback in many ways. Number one, he's local. He's from Baltimore. Maryland had a tough time for a while getting guys from Baltimore. Ernie Graham was a player with Lefty Drizel. He was a great player at Maryland. I think he still holds the single-game scoring record, 42, 44 points. I forget what it was. But he went back to Baltimore after his playing days were over, and he spread the word that, yeah, you don't want to wind up at Maryland. And when Gary Williams got there at right after the Bob Wade era ended, now Bob Wade was from Baltimore. He had the team from Dunbar, but I don't think he even had any great success recruiting there. And Gary got Keith Booth, who was one of the top recruits in the country. Joe Smith turned out to be the best player in that freshman class, but Booth was an outstanding college player. He was a great college player. He had a cup of coffee in the NBA. He actually, I think, was part of a Bulls team that won a championship playing limited minutes. But as a college player, he was exactly what you would want. And he was a 4-year player who got better year by year. And by his senior year, was the clear leader of the team, had the team on his back. And I think they made a pretty good run. I don't know if they made it to the Sweet 16, but they were a really good team, a ranked team almost all year long. And that's the way college basketball used to work, that you would bring in a player who was a little bit green as a freshman and would get better year by year. The last one like this was Grievous Vasquez. If you look at Grievous Vasquez's numbers as a freshman and a sophomore, they were pretty good. By the time he got to be a junior, he was a great, great player. And he was good enough to be drafted at the end of the first round coming out of Maryland and had like a 6 or 7 year NBA career. That's great. That's what you want. Not everybody goes and becomes a lottery pick. You know, those guys are very, very rare. And if you look at Julian Reese's numbers, these are really incredible in that this is not supposed to happen in college basketball anymore. Came in as a freshman. He's a big recruit, highly recruited player. He was Mark Turgeon's last recruiting class, 2021-2022. He had one start the whole year. Started one game, averaged only 17, just under 18 minutes a game. He averaged 5.7 points a game and 4.4 rebounds. Those used to be numbers for a freshman. You go, okay, he's growing. He's getting better. He made a leap in year 2 when Kevin Willard came in his sophomore year, started 33 games, averaged 11.4 points a game, and averaged 7 rebounds. Those are great numbers for him. And he was really the only big man then. As a junior, he got better. This is before Derek Queen arrived on the scene this year. Averaged 13.7 points a game, 9.5 rebounds. Excellent numbers, especially since he was the only big man they had, and the team couldn't shoot. So they knew if they dropped the ball inside to him, he wasn't going to kick it out because nobody could hit any shots. Well, this year his numbers are down a little bit, but boy, there are great reasons for it. He's averaging 13 points a game and 9 rebounds a game. Those are great numbers, of course. But Derek Queen is taking points inside, and Derek Queen is taking rebounds. So given that he's splitting those numbers with another big man, it's totally understood. Here's the biggest thing, though. This is really I've never seen anything like this. His first year, he didn't shoot that many free throws, and he wasn't bad. He was an 80% free throw shooter, just not taking many free throws because he didn't get a lot of minutes. His sophomore year, this is where he became something of a liability at the free throw line. He hit just over 50%. And you couldn't put him in at the end of close games because he couldn't hit them. Last year was better, but not much better. He was 56%. This year, go ahead, foul him at the end of the games. He's a 73% free throw shooter. And this is the way that college basketball used to work and college basketball should work. But it doesn't work that way at all, and it's the money grab. Now, he was not like, he did not sacrifice in terms of money because he could have gone someplace else, and I don't know how the negotiating went, but he got money to stay. His last 3 years, he's made money in College Park. He went to Maryland, I think because he was from Baltimore, and actually his sister, Angel Reese, who wound up transferring to LSU, she had a great freshman year at Maryland before he got there. So, she probably took him around, showed him the campus, and, the things that could happen. They recruited him. They brought him in. But it wasn't until the last 3 years that he's made money with the portal. And not the portal, but the NIL. And so I think that this is something to celebrate. Will we see this again? I don't know. There's the grass is greener in other places. And I don't know if he's a pro or not. He may not be, but the fact that he can hit free throws is helpful. He can't really shoot outside, so that may be a hindrance for him, but he certainly can have a professional career in Europe. And what we see here is a real throwback. We just don't see the 4-year college player. So this is going to be a really big senior day for him tomorrow in College Park. All right. Coming up next, we will get to what's going on with the Cleveland Browns. Also, the Duke basketball program is losing an assistant coach who will become the head coach at Miami next season. When's he leaving? Right now. Why? That's coming up. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. And I get a chuckle out of this. The head of the NFL Players Association says this talk of an 18-game schedule is just talk. Yeah, it'll be brief talk. The owners will throw down $1 billion, and you'll play an 18-game schedule. That's the way it works. And they'll get closer and closer to 20 games. Why do they want 18 games? More product, more money. Super Bowl weekend, President's Day weekend, a national holiday. Come on, you can huff and puff, but they're going to blow your house down. It's just the way it works. College basketball to talk about. Bill Belichick off and running. College football. Some didn't think it would get this far, but it's happening at North Carolina. We'll talk about that and more. Let me get this basketball story in case you haven't been following this. This was announced either yesterday or the day before. Jai Lucas. And not that I need anything to make me feel older, but Jai Lucas is the son of John Lucas, who was a great player at Maryland, All-American, number one draft pick coming out in 1976. Had a long NBA career, but it was tinged by drug abuse. He was in and out of the league because of suspensions. He overcame his cocaine dependency and has helped others. He's got I think he's still got a clinic that he has in Houston, and coached in the NBA for a number of years. I guess he's out of coaching now. Geez, Lucas must be 70 years old. Whew, wow. Anyway, his son Jai Lucas, who's 36, has been what they call the defensive coordinator at Duke, assistant coach there, and under John Shire, and they're having a great year. They're a team that could win the national championship. They may have a number one seed. They've got Cooper Flagg, who could be the number one pick in the draft. That's a great year for Duke, and they always have great years. But this is another year where they're going to probably play deep into March, and they could even get to April 7th, which is when the national championship game is being played. You would think that with the college basketball season not starting until next November, that they would hang on to Jai Lucas until at least the Duke season is over before he takes over at Miami. Au contraire. No. No, he's leaving right now. And as Pat Forty writes at SI.com, he says, the system is to blame. The situation is a mess. John Shire said yesterday, the timing is, it's not ideal. Yeah, right. They're about to play a huge game against North Carolina tomorrow night. And then they have the ACC tournament and then the NCAA tournament. And they don't have a guy who's organized the defense all year. I don't know how important he is to the program, but I would think he's somewhat important. But as Forty writes, the calendar, including the timing of the transfer portal, has forced some difficult decisions in Durham. Miami's season ends tomorrow because the Hurricanes were so bad they finished 18th and last in the league and missed the 15-team ACC tournament. The portal opens March 24th, right after the first and second rounds of the NCAA tournament are completed. If all goes according to the Blue Devils' plan, Duke could play until April the 7th. So the portal's open during the NCAA tournament. That's great. Forty writes, there have been past examples in football of assistant coaches accepting head coaching opportunities elsewhere but finishing the season before leaving. The Alabama Crimson Tide, Nick Saban did it with Kirby Smart on his way to the Georgia Bulldogs, Steve Sarkisian on his way to Texas. Lane Kiffin was actually pulled out during Alabama's run to the 2016 playoff because Nick Saban thought he wasn't concentrating enough on what he was doing, and they let him go to Ole Miss. But he says those times were different times. Smart's hiring at Georgia was late in the 2015 season. Sarkisian late in the 20 season. And he says if Ohio State Buckeyes assistant Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles had taken head coaching jobs instead of another coordinator role, would they have been able to see it through to January 20th for the Buckeyes, who went on to win the national championship? Yes. How about that? As Forty writes, in basketball, where entire rosters can disappear, the imperative might be greater to start immediately. Undoubtedly, that spurred earlier administrative decisions with Miami, Florida State, Indiana, and Utah all announcing changes during the regular season. Yeah, you got to get a jump on this because, damn, the portal's opening March 24th. Shire said, hopefully we can make a run at this thing the way I feel we can. Lucas would be behind all the way in the transfer portal being set up, so there's decisions that have to be made now for his program moving forward, not to mention hiring the staff and all that. So, yeah, this is one of those things where I think we can look at it and say it doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And, well, he's not going to have his defensive coordinator, and if Duke doesn't win the national title, this is one of the things they can point to. As Kevin Willard said at the beginning of the season, the system is broken. We have to deal with it. You know, he's not walking away from it. He's worked hard his whole life to become a head coach and make the kind of money that he makes and to run a program that's as good as Maryland. Yes, but he's not walking away. But he said he's right. It's broken. Look at this nonsense. Just absolute nonsense. Anyway, here's something interesting involving the Cleveland Browns. You may have heard the other day that Deshaun Watson's contract was restructured. So he's still going to get all his money. It's guaranteed money from the Browns, but it takes some money off the cap. It also, with his situation, he's had a torn Achilles, which he suffered during the season, and then apparently he tore it again during rehab. It's a question whether he'll play at all this year. And the likelihood is that they're going to be drafting a quarterback and getting a veteran quarterback. Shedeur Sanders, reportedly at the Combine, seemed less than interested with some teams. And the question was, well, does he not want to go to that particular team? Does he feel like, if he acts like kind of a jerk, Cleveland won't draft him? That could be in play. But there's also this, and I found this interesting from what Mike Florio said yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. Now, he throws a lot of things at the wall. Sometimes they stick, sometimes they don't. But this is Florio's take on why Shedeur may be dropping in the eyes of some of these draft people, not necessarily because he was less than interested during the interviews, reportedly, with teams, and we don't know if Cleveland was one of them, but this is information that got out or words that got out after the Combine. He seemed like he was like arrogant, like he didn't really want to be there, which could have been strategy. If it's Cleveland, may not want to go there. But there's also this, and this is an interesting, whether it's true or not, it's interesting. Why is Shedeur dropping? Not necessarily because of the way he was at the Combine, because of something else. Listen to this.
Great personality, magnetic. You can see that his dad is Deion Sanders, very worldly, kind of mature beyond his years, knows how to deal with people very well, a lot of emotional intelligence. I was impressed with him, but I knew it was going to happen. The chatter's already begun. And I think the chatter stems from one very simple fact. When we had Deion Sanders at the Super Bowl, I pressed him on this question of, are you ever interested in coaching in the NFL? Because he's given different answers over the past couple of years about that. And he told us the only way he would ever coach in the NFL is if he was coaching his son. That creates, for some coaches, I think, a hesitation to ever sign off on your team drafting Shedeur Sanders, because you might be signing your own pink slip because Deion ends up being the coach of the team that Shedeur Sanders goes to. At least that's one of the concerns that one of these coaches would have. So I think that's where some of this noise is coming from. You've got coaches who are thinking, wait a minute, I don't want to have Deion Sanders hovering over me if we have his son as our quarterback. And I think the 4D chess that Deion might be playing here, by saying what he said, you scare away the coaches of the dysfunctional teams, the coaches who would be worried about outside noise from Deion. And maybe you engineer a little slide down to a team where it is stable, it isn't dysfunctional, and the coach is sufficiently secure and confident that he's not worried about the possibility that Deion Sanders would want to become the coach of the team that his son's playing for. So it could work out well for Shedeur. The noise that's going to start, and it's already started, it could cause him to drop, but he could drop into a good spot, not a team with a history of derailing the careers of young quarterbacks.
Yeah, so there's two things here. One, going to a more stable organization further down the draft board. That's one. But the other one is, if you take Shedeur, and let's say it doesn't work out in year one, you're going to have Deion as a possibility to replace you the following year as head coach. I hadn't really thought of it that way. Also, this angle, this is Albert Breer of SI.com on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and his look at what Cleveland may do now that they've moved the money around and aren't taking as big of a cap hit with Watson next year. Who are they likely looking at, and what could they possibly do in both free agency and the draft at quarterback?
Yeah, I did some reporting on this in November and December ahead of one of our games where we had the Browns. And, I know back then, this is before the second Achilles tear, that their plan was to add a lot of competition to the quarterback room, which is different than the way they approached it the last couple of years with Deshaun. What they were putting in the room before was what they felt like was support for Deshaun, not competition for him. And that was one of the reasons why the divorce, from Joe Flacco happened, is because they wanted to set it up to support him. That was going to change from really like almost the beginning of last season. Like they felt like after the way he played, and then he tears the Achilles, that it was time to get better production out of the position. So that's the baseline. Like this is not just related to the second Achilles tear. From there, I think their approach has been, we're going to look at the draft. We are going to turn over every rock on every player in the draft because we know we're going to have a high pick, and we're going to attack the veteran market too. And it wouldn't surprise me, Rich, if they pull both levers. Now, what does that look like? I think because of the number that they have on their books from Deshaun Watson and the guarantees and the cash, not just the cap, but the cash, the $92 million they have fully guaranteed over the next 2 years for Deshaun. They have to get a little creative in the veteran market. That's why I think most people have looked at it and said Kirk Cousins would be the perfect guy because you'd probably be working off the offset. You get him in for the veteran minimum and still draft one. The problem is you don't control Kirk Cousins becoming available. He might become available next week if things get really ugly. He might not be available for 3 months. So you can't really control that if you're the Browns. So now what do you do if you don't know whether or not he's going to be available, if he can't force his way out because he doesn't want to be in Atlanta? Then it's, well, do we look at Daniel Jones plus a rookie? And that's part of why, by the way, Rich, they're having the 30 visits with the quarterbacks this week. They're trying to get as complete a picture as they possibly can of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders so they know what they're going to be dealing with in the draft. And they know if there's really what they view as a real answer there. Or, do they have to go heavier on the veteran option and then, maybe they don't deem one of those guys worth a top 2 pick and they say, okay, we'll draft one in the second or third round. Either way, they're going to come out of this, I believe, with a new veteran and a new rookie on the roster. It's just sort of a sliding scale what levels those are at.
Interesting. So you're saying they're kind of going early on their visits with Ward and Shedeur prior to free agency because that it will inform them how they approach free agency with what aggressiveness and who to target. Interesting. And I'm just wondering, listen, I totally understand that this is Andrew Berry's plan. Makes total sense, complete sense. But also makes sense that if you're telling this to Myles Garrett, he would say, yeah, I don't want any part of that as I'm pushing 30. Like, and I'm wanting a trophy. Like, that sounds like far away from a trophy is what, to be honest with you. Or it sounds like, we're still trying to figure this thing out. Hang with us. We need you to win some football games while we get up to that speed, right? I mean, or you believe that Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, second overall, could just continue this remarkable string of rookie quarterbacks drafted in that position. I mean, that's the question about Garrett.
Yeah, that's hard too, because I think there's part of it that's on the Browns to show Garrett how serious they are about winning right now. Because let's be honest, Rich, like any guy in Myles Garrett's position, he doesn't care about your 3-year plan. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to compete for a championship right now. Like, tomorrow's not promised to him. So he wants to go chase rings right now. And I do think he's being forthright when he says this isn't about the money. This is a guy who thinks a little bit differently. And yeah, I mean, could I see new money being part of whatever the conclusion is here? Absolutely. But I don't think it's the driving force. I think the driving force is he wants to go win somewhere. So that's part of it, right? Like, it's showing Myles Garrett that you're serious about winning in the here and the now. And then I think kind of attached to that for the Browns, this is just me talking, okay? But I think like the Browns, I think it's on them to take a serious look in the mirror and just say to themselves, with guys like Joel Bitonio and Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett most of all, right? These guys that are either in the heart of their primes or the back end of their primes. I think a huge part of this is looking at it and saying, can we get good enough fast enough to still have these guys in the primes of their careers while we're competing for championships, right? Like, in other words, can we get this thing where it needs to be at quarterback most of all and all over the place in general, in the AFC, in that environment, in the division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, in a conference with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen? Can that happen fast enough where when it does happen, Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward and those guys who've been at the core are still at the top of their games? And I think to me, like, that's the question you have to ask if you're the Browns that informs you whether or not you seriously consider trading him.
Albert Breer here on
but
the.
They haven't. But just to be clear, they haven't shown any.
No, I heard the same
indication to anyone that they're going to do it.
But
so
the two things I heard at the combine, Albert, one that I mentioned in my, my annual rumors segment, is that the Browns truly have no intention of trading Myles Garrett. And the other one I heard is that, they're definitely taking a quarterback second overall, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, and Myles Garrett, that's ramping up a little bit because the reports are that he wanted a meeting with Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the team, and Haslam didn't want to do that. It's like, I'm not going to entertain any thoughts of trading you, so just shut up. You're under contract. We're not dealing you. And we'll see where that goes. I mean, he may be forced into a situation where he has to hold out. Who knows? And I don't think the Browns want that because then they're dealing him in less than ideal circumstances. You've also got, and I've talked about all the free agents that Washington has, including Marcus Mariota. And Diana Rossini of The Athletic put this out about an hour or so ago. She said the Raiders are exploring veteran quarterback options in the free agent and trade market. That includes the possibility of trading for a current starting quarterback. As far as free agents, Marcus Mariota is a free agent, and Sam Fortier attached this to that tweet. Sam Fortier of the Post, he says, I have to imagine Marcus Mariota is in play in Vegas. He loves Vegas. He still lives there in the offseason. I didn't know that. I knew he lived closer to the West Coast, didn't know he lives in Vegas. And Raiders offensive coordinator Chip Kelly coached Mariota for a time at Oregon. If Mariota leaves, the Commanders could bring back Jeff Driscoll as quarterback number 2 or add another vet. They have Sam Hartman under contract. He was an undrafted free agent out of Notre Dame. He's a little bit older, made the transfer, 5-year college player, the whole thing. A little small, but would they go into next season with the two backups being Sam Hartman and Jeff Driscoll? Driscoll's played some in the NFL. I still think that Kirk Cousins is not out of the question. He has not yet been released by Atlanta. They're saying they're not going to release him. They're still going to have to pay him the money. It's guaranteed money. But I just thought about this. The story that came out a few weeks ago from Don Van Natta, which was a great piece about how Dan Snyder, it was Wickersham too, it was Van Natta and Wickersham. They talked about how Dan Snyder is just furious at the success of the team, and he, quote, effing hates it, and how he's living his life in London, walking around grumble about the team that he lost. Wouldn't it be just more fuel to the fire if he watched Kirk Cousins come back here on the cheap and be like the Marcus Mariota role model, the kind of perfect backup quarterback that Mariota was last year to Jaden Daniels? Wouldn't that be great? Oh, just more misery for Snyder. Such schadenfreude. So much fun. That's it for me for the week. I'll see you back here tomorrow. I'll see you back here Monday at 9 a.m.